Have you ever wondered how the military deals with vehicles that may have starter issues or battery issues? Well, my name is Technical Sergeant Terrell Leak, and I'll be here to explain to you on what we need to do in order to identify where the battery is, the proper voltage. We'll also be going over how to properly jump that vehicle, or what the military says is slave cable that vehicle. We'll also go over the voltage regulator and what the proper voltage is, and also how to start this vehicle in case of emergency. With all that being said, let's get started. This is the M145 up-armored Humvee. It has two 12-volt batteries that are wired in series parallel for a combination of 24 volts. We're going to go over the voltage. This 24 volts is needed 500 cranking amps to turn over this Cummins diesel engine. Now start by troubleshooting. You'll notice the terminals on this vehicle. The first thing of troubleshooting this vehicle in the event that it doesn't start is to touch the vehicle by the end of the cable, the insulated portion, and give it a wiggle. You notice that this termination or terminal does not move. As you move over to the other one, you notice that we do have movement. If in the event that you do have movement on that terminal, you take the proper wrench and you tighten or snug that down, and you move on to check the other terminals. Now, I've talked about how to check the terminals and check for tightness. We'll also go over the voltage. Both of these batteries are 12 volts. You're gonna go from the negative terminal to the first battery to the positive terminal of the second battery, and you should receive a total of 24 volts. If you do not receive a total of 24 volts, it's safe to assume that one of these batteries is bad. You'll then disconnect all the terminals off the batteries. You should receive 12 volts from negative to positive on either one. If you don't, then you've isolated to which battery it is. Next, I'm gonna go over corrosion. Corrosion is a big problem in these vehicles. A lot of times these seats are not taken off and we don't inspect them for periods of time. So corrosion may build up. Corrosion may also look like ashes from a cigarette built onto one of the terminals. Usually the color for corrosion is green. The way we combat this corrosion is we have a wire brush that we brush the terminal. And if that doesn't work, we take any carbonated beverage, pour it onto the terminal, and go ahead and just brush it. Let it sit for about 10 minutes, come back and brush it again, and that should relieve any of this. It should relieve any of the seized corrosion that's on that battery. Now we've talked about how we check for tightness. We talked about corrosion. We'll also talk about how to jump this vehicle. This cable is a 24-volt cable. It is rated for 500 amps. Since these batteries are 500 cranking amps apiece, this is what we use. The military is known as a slave cable. There's a terminal located at the base of the battery that you will plug this cable into. Since we know this is a vehicle that we're going to say has a dead battery, we'll leave this plugged in. We'll go over to the vehicle that we know is working, and we'll also plug that in. Once the vehicles are plugged in, we'll leave the vehicle that we know is good, or the powered vehicle, we'll leave that on for a total of 5 to 10 minutes. Once we let that vehicle charge this battery for a total of 5 to 10 minutes, we'll go ahead and attempt to start this vehicle. If in the event that this vehicle does not start, it's safe to assume that it may be the voltage regulator. Now at this time, I'm going to walk over to the voltage regulator, and I'll show you how to check the voltage on that regulator. Sitting on top of the generator is a voltage regulator. That voltage regulator has two terminals. At each one of the terminals, once you test them with your meter, you should receive 24 volts. If in the event that you do not receive 24 volts, it is safe to assume that this voltage regulator is inop. You may consult your local supply unit and get a new one, or cannibalize this voltage regulator from another vehicle that you know does work. Now I've talked about how to troubleshoot and test this voltage regulator. We're going to move on to jump this vehicle in the event in case of emergency. You notice that there's a series of pins on this Canon plug. The center pin is your common voltage. You will need 2 paper clips or 2 pieces of wire. You'll start with the common plug, that's where your power is. You will stick the wire in your common plug and leave it in the common plug and go to the top right terminal. That is your fuel. You will leave that wire in there and move on to your paper clip or your second wire. You'll put that wire in your common plug and you will allow that to rest in your bottom right plug for 10 seconds. That is the amount of time that it would take for the glow plugs to energize because this is a diesel engine. Once the 10 seconds is over, you'll move to the bottom left pin. That is where your starter is located. You will tap that pin and this vehicle will start. You just bypassed the control module that's underneath the dash and you allowed yourself to get out of harm's way, and you just started this vehicle in the case of emergency. So we talked about how to identify the battery, the proper voltage that you should receive on the 2 batteries. We've also talked about how to properly jump the cable and identify which cable is needed to be jumped. We've also talked about how to troubleshoot the voltage regulator. And last but not least, we talked about how to start a military vehicle in the event in case of emergency. With all that being said, this concludes my speech on the M145 Up Armor Humvee.